let's talk about something important. Put that coffee down. Coffee still closes on. That's right, babe. I just bought this truck straight cash. Now I got enough cigarettes to last me and my family for the rest of my life. Rich, biatch. Is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time. A, B, C. A always be B, C closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen. Cannonball! Hello, Peter. What's happening? I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow. So if you can be here around 9, that would be great. Okay? Everybody else, show me the money!
During holiday travel, some people get delirious, some get delayed, and some get Del Griffin.
American Light and Fixture, Director of Sales, Shower Curtain Ring Division.
Neil Page got all 3.
I was on my way home to spend a nice holiday with my family. Instead, I'm in a motel bed with a stranger.
So instead of Thanksgiving with his family, he's spending 3 days with the turkey.
2 happy clams just whistling down the road.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, and a Marconi family.
Paramount Pictures presents Steve Martin.
Ever been to Hawaii?
Yeah.
You see Don Ho while you were there?
See the second show, that's the best one.
Is that right?
Yeah.
John Candy.
Why are you holding my hand? Where's your other hand? Between 2 pillows. Those aren't pillows.
In a new film by John Hughes. Planes, trains, and automobiles.
See that Bears game last week? Yeah, hell of a game, hell of a game.
All right, we are back for another edition of a 330 Sports Show video or movie breakdown, I should say. We're going to do the 1987 classic, great Thanksgiving movie. As you know, this is Thanksgiving week, and joining me is going to be Greg Kirchner for this one. We've done plenty in the past. We just recently, I think our last one was Goodfellas, and previous to that we did we've done a whole bunch of sports movies and non-sports movies. So I'll drop the links for those in the comments and on the podcast. So Greg, let's just start with this. I mean, obviously this is a great movie. John Candy, Steve Martin, kind of at their peaks, really. So your overall thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. So, I mean, I've seen it so many times. I've watched it in preparation for doing this, and I would be watching it this time of year anyway. And it's an incredible comedy. It's not that long, so it's like probably I think it's like an hour and 40 minutes. There's really no like dull moments to it. There's maybe just a couple little ones, but it pretty much flows, and it's hilarious from start to finish, and it is like a laugh out loud comedy. And I guess watching it in preparation to do this, you kind of look at it through a different set of eyes. And this is one of the better comedies maybe ever. I would say it's absolutely tremendous. Like I could watch it over and over again, never get sick of it. And you're right, it's like two comedic titans at the peak of their powers. And John Candy just, steals the show. And
No doubt.
yeah, he's incredible. And just about everything he does. But we could probably have the debate of, is this the best John Candy movie? But it's certainly on the podium.
Yeah, no doubt. It's definitely on his Mount Rushmore. If not, I would probably, I still might put Uncle Buck ahead of that as his best performance. But yeah, this one is right up there. And Steve Martin, obviously there's like Father of the Bride, and he did just a ton of movies on top of like SNL. But he is like peak Steve Martin in this movie too, where he's got that like he's kind of like an ass, but you really like him too at the same time. And you mentioned it's like a laugh out loud comedy, but like there's some moments that really like almost like break your heart in this movie too, for like John Candy and really even Steve Martin too, but mostly the John Candy character in this movie. So let's just go with this. Like the basic plot of the movie is Steve Martin is sitting at this ridiculous meeting where his what is he, an advertising marketing type meeting, and the guy is just staring at it. Actually, what it reminded me of? The beginning of Christmas Vacation, when Chevy Chase is in that meeting, and it just has those same vibes. And Steve Martin's like, I gotta get home for I gotta make this 6 o'clock plane. And just like that leads into, you can feel his anxiety, and like the Kevin Bacon cameo right there at the beginning. And it's just so good. It just starts off fast, and like you said, there's really no dull moments in this movie.
No, it's nonstop. As soon as he gets basically walks out and has the showdown with Kevin Bacon, and then meets that lawyer and pays him the $75. I mean, it's nonstop. It's like it's almost like an action movie in a weird way, because of all the different scenes and just the different locations, and it moves fast, and it
really
awesome.
Does.
Yeah.
And we'll get to, this is really a 2-person movie, but there's a lot of like little characters in this movie. But it's like there's a lot of like, and I know Bill Simmons says this a lot, there's a lot of that guy in this movie. It's like Ferris Bueller's dad from that movie, the secretary from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, for Art Rooney. You got you have the cop that's McKeon in that movie, and if anybody that watched Better Call Saul, that's his brother in that show. And just like a list goes on and on and on. So it's just so filled and littered with like little cameos throughout the movie, but these characters make such a great impact. So anyone stick out to you in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, you hit some of the high notes. There's a few Seinfeld references to the guy that falls asleep on Steve Martin on the airplane was in Seinfeld, like the old man. And then the cab driver was Kramer, and the pilot, who also was in Home Alone. So, I mean, it's interesting, all these characters. And it was interesting you brought up Christmas Vacation, the beginning of Christmas Vacation, is everything we mentioned between, Ferris Bueller, Christmas Vacation, that the Home Alone, where the cab driver's from, along with Seinfeld. Those are all John Hughes movies as well. So if you look at John Hughes IMDb, I mean, the movies that he either directed or wrote or both are, I mean, some of the all-time classic movies of basically our generation growing up were John Hughes movies. And this is right up there with all of them. And this was one that's kind of, he did a lot of teen comedies and this was one he kind of branched off from that. This was right after that line of like 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller. I guess this would be after Ferris Bueller, I think. Yeah. So,
and a lot of those Chicago, I think you had referenced it before, but a lot of those Chicago ties in these movies too, which is kind of cool. So any like let's just get into some of these, like, you know, particular moments. Or so what's your favorite we're not necessarily category, but what's your favorite scene from this entire movie?
so I don't want to steal your thunder, because I know you I know you're partial to one scene. I mean,
you can steal it if you
well,
want.
I'll let you talk about the rental car scene, but what I realized watching this again is there is probably arguably the best 15-minute stretch of any comedy, maybe movie, like ever, between the rental car. So it goes from like the rental car scene to going out to gets his ass kicked by the cab guy, then gets picked up by John Candy. Then they're driving. You got the messing with the seat back.
Oh yeah.
And you have John Candy doing the mess around, which is incredible, and then the wrong way.
Yeah,
that's just back to back to back. So that is, I guess it kind of cheated because it's not one scene, but that is my favorite part of the movie. That is just an incredible 15 minutes. Like beat for beat, as good a 15 minutes as you'll ever find in a movie.
No doubt. And I mean, you had mentioned it. I gotta use it, but to me, the rental car scene is, I would put it in my top 5 favorite scenes of all time in any movie. It literally makes me laugh from and apparently the I can't think of her, I don't know her name offhand, but you know who we're talking about. The secretary that's in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. She's the rental car clerk, and you know, apparently she ad-libbed that scene where she's on the phone. She's not really talking to anybody, you know, and then he is already, you know, he's walked through over a runway, over a bridge, through the snow. The bus dropped him off and there was no car there, and not to mention all the other stuff he's gone through. And I think we've all been in Steve Martin's shoes where we've just had enough, and maybe we don't drop 19 F-bombs in 1 minute like happened in that scene. I think that's a combination between 18 from him and 1 from her.
And the 1 from her is the best.
So good. But I think everyone on a personal level can relate to that scene. I'm not going to play it during our portion of this, but I already have it clipped and it's going to run during this podcast. So that will come at the end. You know, might knock us down the algorithm a little bit, but it's definitely worth the watch if you have not seen it. And if you watch it, you know, on YouTube TV or whatever your streaming service is, it's kid friendly where you can, you know, hear the clean edited version. But if you're an adult, you need to watch the unedited version of that.
And even if you are watching with your kids, that's literally the only scene I think that you would have to put the earmuffs on for.
Exactly.
I think they get it all out in one fell swoop.
And it's you know, they say some people are implosive and some people are explosive, and Steve Martin held it all in and then just finally unleashed because he had enough. And you know, I can relate to that for sure, and I think just about probably 90% of the world's population can relate to that scene. And I like how they remixed in there, like, you're messing with the wrong guy, from like the very first from like the very first clip, and it just like builds and builds and builds with tension, and it gets better and better and better. And like you said, that just sets off a series of great scenes over the next like 15 minutes. So it's hilarious, so good. Any other scenes stick out to you as like just like must watch if you're going back to like rewatch it?
Oh man, I mean, just it's all rewatchable. Like
Yeah.
I like I guess the two jump out to me. When he gets on the plane and sits between John Candy, and just that whole sequence, and then when he's like takes off his shoes and like
Oh,
just the reaction is just incredible. Like it's so overdone, but it's John Candy and it's perfect. But I don't think anybody else could pull that off. Like that whole thing's good, yeah. Worst thing you can have is some chowderhead that can't keep his mouth shut. Just that's great. And then it's like a 2 minute, like one of my favorite parts of the movie that gets me every single time is when they're on the bus and the teenagers are making out and just his reaction. Like when the guy says, why don't you take a picture, it'll last longer, just John Candy's reaction to that is just, he's like, oh, you got busted. It was just so good. It makes me laugh every single time. It was like, I don't know how they kept a straight face through it, but it feels like something we do as like teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like you got busted. Unbelievable. So those two kind of immediately jump out.
Sticking with that bus scene when they're like singing the tunes and he's like, it could not like be any more accurate of their personalities. Like 3 coins.
Like the whole bus like snaps back.
and then John Candy goes into the Flintstones theme song, which we've had a few laughs on this podcast before about the Flintstones. So
yes.
Oh my gosh, so good, so good. So obviously, let me ask you this: like, this movie, mid to late 80s, no cell phones, like no Ubers, stuff like that, like credit cards, like if they get lost, you have your phone and you could like sync your Apple Pay or whatever to it. Could this movie be done today?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, so they tried to do this movie today, like maybe 5 or so years ago. If you've ever seen the movie Due Date.
Oh yeah,
Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis. I mean, it's as close to Planes Train. I mean, it's good. It's not like, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. plays the asshole better than anybody because probably might be. And Galifianakis is great, but the whole time you watch the movie, you're like, this is just planes, trains, and automobiles. So it was a little, they had to do it a little different. I think it was like he couldn't fly because he got like kicked off the plane for being sick. And but yeah, it would have, you can't do it the same. Clearly it's like, Home Alone's the extreme example, but it's like, yeah, you can't do you'd have to change things up a little bit, clearly. But it's been tried. And that one's not bad, but it's not this.
yeah.
But it is tough.
Let me ask you this: how much do you think a shower curtain ring salesman brings in annually?
I was thinking about that one too. I'm like, this guy, like, well, he doesn't have a home. I think that, I think you implies that he's just always traveling and always working, but I'm having a hard time imagining that he would be able to cover his travel expenses because I mean, it's not exactly a high dollar product, but I'll tell you what, he can sell. You could, as noted by the scene where he was able to get all that money selling him his jewelry. He is a hell of a salesman,
no doubt.
But I can't imagine he's clearing more than probably in that time frame, no more than 30 grand a year, maybe.
No doubt. Yeah. And do you think this, like, I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole here. I'm sure John Hughes wouldn't want us to do this either, but we obviously, by the end of the movie, there's kind of that twist that maybe some people see coming, maybe some people don't. If you've seen it over and over, like for you said you watched it twice this weekend. I watched it the one time, and it had probably been a good 10 years since I've had seen it, at least the whole way from start to beginning. So, I had forgotten little parts or little scenes of this movie, but you kind of know the little twist that happens at the end. And it really, like, when you hear it, it like really does like tug at your heart, like, and breaks for this guy. But my question is, like, has John Candy been doing this for 8 years since his wife died? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Kind of like
yeah.
living off of other people, like, like staying at hotel rooms, but like being like, does that make him almost like a bad guy? I mean, he's a
That's
good guy, but you know what I mean.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't really have a good answer for that. I mean, maybe he kind of took a couple years off after his wife passed and it was just too painful to go back home. But that is, yeah, that is like, is an interesting choice to be like, she's been gone for 8 years as opposed to
Mhm.
like, she's been gone since last spring or something.
Right.
It's a fair point. It'd be interesting to, unfortunately, John Hughes has left us, but it'd be interesting to know if there was even a thought to that. Sometimes they just
Yeah.
write it and don't even
Right.
think about it really.
Like it's a comedy, idiot. You're not supposed to ask the question. But yeah, I mean, overall, just such a freaking great movie from
And
start to finish.
and to your point on the heartstrings, like John Candy, like he shows it in a lot of his movies.
Mhm.
And I think, and if you look at his history, I think he was in JFK, and I have not seen
Mm,
JFK, but that I don't think he's been in very many dramatic movies, but
right.
between, we'll just go with the two favorites probably that for most people, this movie and Uncle Buck. I mean, he has moments where you're like, this guy can act.
Oh
Like this
yeah.
guy, if he would have, had the opportunity and wouldn't have, tragically passed too soon, it wouldn't have surprised me if he had an Oscar type performance. Like you think about Robin Williams won an Oscar, like these comedic kind of these comedic actors and actresses, like you think maybe, oh, all they can do is comedy, but just those few moments in this movie, like the first one being in the hotel room after Steve Martin like completely rips him a new one. Just
Yeah.
you just look at his like facial expressions. Yeah. Like you look at his facial expressions like through that scene, and it's like, wow, I mean, this
Yeah.
guy he could have been a really good dramatic actor. It would have been
Yeah.
interesting to see. Um, I bet he would have done some type of movie at some point, would have gotten at least an Oscar nomination, if not won one. But it works.
Hmm.
He's got incredible range, and he does it in Uncle Buck too. And it's like it gives a realness to his character. I think everybody looks at John Candy and is like, that guy reminds me of fill in the blank, somebody, right? He kind of reminds you of somebody that's either your uncle or or somebody's dad. Like he's just he plays like that, the kind of everyman, like really, really well.
What, I'm glad you said that, because we were watching this movie yesterday and I told Jana, I said, that's Chris Farley. I said,
Yeah.
that is Chris Farley. I mean, maybe not to the level Chris Farley took it, but I mean, I just think like big guy, like kind of like a lovable, like, teddy bear, whatever you want to, throw at him. But he is just a really likable person that, can literally like sell shower curtain rings and make enough money to be homeless and still like doing all right. But I'm glad you said that, because that, like, literally that was my comparison, was Chris Farley when I'm watching this movie just a couple days ago. So, but when I watched it the first couple times, I might not have thought that.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, he is kind of like the everyman. Like everybody can relate to his character, to someone they know or someone they've watched on screen. So I think that's a great drop there. All right, Greg, you're really good at like the did you knows and like the trivia and tidbits. Do you got any for this movie?
So you hit the let's see. So I'm gonna cheat here and go to flip onto IMDb here. You hit the point on the ad lib of the Thanksgiving conversation that the rental car lady was having. That was really good. There's not too much in this movie.
The one that, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I got one that might explain the whole like the whole not thinking about the 8 years of John Candy's wife being dead is John Hughes wrote the first draft of the screenplay in 3 days,
Oh
which is
wow.
absolutely unbelievable to think about. Obviously there were edits and stuff after that, but to fire a draft in 3 days is pretty incredible.
No doubt.
Um, one thing that's very subtle, and I actually did notice it the second time I watched it this weekend because I read these in between, is at the beginning of the movie when Dell, John Candy's character, steals Neil's cab after he pays the attorney off, and the cab like kind of races away. There's basically a puddle. He looks down at a puddle. The camera pans down at the puddle. There's two shower curtain rings sitting in the puddle. Like there's just no way, unless you knew, at that point it hadn't even been introduced yet.
Right.
But and I just the other couple other things, like now that I'm scanning this, is Flintstones was John Candy's all-time favorite cartoon. So
okay, makes sense
why he did that. But then this movie was like, there is a somewhere, I don't know, nobody knows where it is, but there's actually a 3-hour version of this movie. It was edited down, so a lot of times in movies like this, that tells me that he probably let these characters riff a lot and just kind of shot a lot of different takes and a lot of different. It'd be interesting to see what the heck a 3-hour version of this movie would look like. but no, I mean, it's kind of one of those that nobody really even knows where it is at this point, if it even exists.
I think that would do this movie a disservice because it is perfect.
It is
the way it is. The only thing I noticed that was cut from this movie, but I think it might be on the TV version, is when they are robbed in the hotel room, they actually order like a pizza and like beer and stuff. And the kid that delivers the food to them is actually the kid that robs them later on. And I think like one of them didn't leave like a significant tip. They might have tipped him like $1 or something, and that might have given a little context to, or like a different feel to why that he came in and robbed them too. So
yeah, that's interesting, because that is a little bit like how did this happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool.
And like he references like John Candy's on that bed and it's like vibrating, and like he mentions like Steve Martin's like, well, I gotta go sleep in this puddle of beer, and like you don't see that scene and there's no context for it, unless you see like the unedited version of that. So those kind of things were really interesting. But another thing that kind of connects this movie with Chris Farley to me, and I know it has nothing to do with Chris Farley, but kind of almost has like a Tommy Boy feel to it. Two guys traveling, like the David Spade character, the Steve Martin character, and Chris Farley and John Candy. It almost kind of has that like Odd Couple type feel to it. And if you're traveling across the country with a buddy, like if it's me and you, like after like 4 or 5 days, you might be like, I'm a little sick of this guy, but we get along, but like when it's like literally you're just thrown into a situation with someone you don't know, it makes for really interesting scenarios that come up. So
that's why it's interesting he snapped like night one and like went off on him. And but again, John Candy, consummate nice guy. He let that one roll off his back. But yeah, I can imagine 2 or 3 days with Belle Griffith, and I think all of us would. Yeah. I mean,
well, like without saying any names, we got some great friends out there, but we have a couple that have been a little bit on the disgusting side of roommates and stuff too. And like when he walks into that bathroom and the socks are in the sink and he dries his face and it's the underwear, and like
Unbelievable.
there's certain things you don't do, and that's one of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's that scene just kind of, got to me and made me laugh a little bit too. So
It's actually interesting that everything we've talked about, I would feel like we've talked about most of the movie. We actually haven't talked about the hotel room, the
Yeah.
first hotel room scene, and that whole, because I would say, like, if you were to say, like, I don't know, if you were to look up probably what are the top three most iconic scenes in the movie, it would be rental car,
Yep.
going the wrong way on
Yep.
the highway, and probably the waking up in bed together.
Mm-hmm.
Which they're all great. It's just
Those
funny.
aren't pillows.
It's just funny you hadn't mentioned that. It's just funny. There's like, yeah, it's so good. Like the way that's all set up, even just the subtlety when you watch, the more you watch it, like with any movie, like you start, like those like, rental car scene aside, because it's just hilarious. But like, I don't know, when we get to like the going the wrong way, it's like, okay, it's seen it so many times.
Yeah.
But you start paying more attention to like the subtleties. And I
Yeah.
like when they walk into the hotel room and they just like they look and they see that there's like just one bed. And it's like, then it pans over and it's like John Candy's face, like looking over, like just that. And like the music is just like like it's like that's just cool. It just kind of sets it all up. And it's like, this is
I
whatever's
think
gonna
he
happen
even
is gonna be
says,
good.
like, the first line, he's like, "You want to take a shower?" He's like, no, like, you want to go first, just like sets the scene for. And then after the pillow thing, they do the classic like guy thing. It's like, how about that Bears game last?
They're going all the way this year. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, so good. Oh man. I had messaged you while I was watching the movie. I said, this was well before Cool Runnings, but like they're sitting in the like one of the later hotel room and like drinking a bunch of different liquor and stuff, and John Candy even drops like a Jamaican accent while drinking rum. So I'm like, it's a little foreshadowing to a future character there, possibly. So
yeah, that's great.
So Greg, we'll wrap this up in a minute, but any other like just final thoughts on this movie and maybe why people should watch it?
I think, well, the second time I watched it with my kids, and they had seen it before. We watched like the AMC version, but they were, especially my oldest son, was like belly laughing the entire movie. So I think sometimes people will be like, oh, that movie's made in 1987. Like it can't be that good. Like, no, it transcends generations and even kids that have no idea what it means to imprint a credit card, like still find this movie hilarious. So I think it's really for all ages, for all, it's not it's whatever type of comedy you like, and it does have those tug on your heartstrings moments, but it's just hilarious. It's a good family comedy, and it's for some reason one of the only Thanksgiving movies like out there. There's just not, it's not something that's been tapped into. So it's something that we'll probably have on our house on Thanksgiving. Just just something you can just put on while you're between football games, or if one of the games is a blowout, or if you're just kind of looking for something to do at night after you're in a food coma. It's an awesome movie, and again, for anyone, any age.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna piggyback off of that. I think it's very similar. Obviously, Thanksgiving is kind of, like, I just think back to college. Like, you go away to college, and it's like you kind of have that like homesick feeling, and it's really nice to like get home and see family, see friends, maybe you haven't seen in a while. And I think that's kind of the plot of this movie. Basically, it's like Steve Martin's character wants to get home to see his family, and like through this journey, he kind of makes a strange friendship, a strange bond with John Candy, and like the little train scene at the end when he goes his own way, and John Candy stays at the train station. He kind of like, they relive the movie in like little scenes, and you kind of get those like, you kind of tell like, well, this character, he wore on him during the movie, but kind of realized like he made a friend, and just realized he's a good dude throughout it. So finally it all clicks with him, and realizes what happens, and or what was going on, and John Candy like tells him the truth about his wife and how she had passed away, and gets home, and basically is like, hey, you're part of the family now, or and come enjoy Thanksgiving with us. And to me, that's like, at the end of the day, that's like what it's all about. And it's like a perfect way to like put a bow on this like hilarious movie from start to finish. So
Yeah.
just like
And
a nice little touch.
and that is so John Hughes-esque when you look, when you think about all the movies we referenced. I mean, we'll go to Home Alone,
Yep.
we'll go to Uncle Buck. A lot of the other ones, Ferris Bueller, maybe not quite as much on that, but you just have this like, it kind of wraps up in a very heartfelt ending.
Yeah.
And there is, among all the comedy, there's a meaningful kind of relationship that emerges between two characters that maybe either were at odds at one point, or in the case of like Home Alone with the old man, just people you would, kind of an unlikely. I think with Uncle Buck, it was with the oldest daughter that was kind of like, didn't like each other, butted heads, but they sort of became like, their bond became the centerpiece of how that movie ended. So it, like, that is a theme, and it works. And in fact, the ending of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Uncle Buck is in a way almost identical in terms of like, arrival back to a house. And in fact, the closing shot of John Candy like is very similar to,
you're right,
movies.
Almost identical.
Yeah.
Even that house, I know it's a different house, even the house looks almost identical, like that Chicago suburb
Yep.
home, and it just has that same feel. So I will push back on Ferris Bueller though, because Ferris Bueller and his sister couldn't stand each other at the beginning of the movie, and
a really good
by
point.
the end they kind of connected with the dislike of Ed Rooney there. So
that's a good point. That's a really good point. You're right. And the Cameron stuff too was kind of, that got serious. So yep, you're right.
It all wraps around, but John Hughes does it again. So for anyone that hasn't seen this movie in a while, like, that's why we like to do these. It's just a really good time to go back and watch a movie. And like Greg said, it's like, I think you could throw this movie on at literally just about any point in the movie, and you're going to get a good laugh, even if it's a 5-minute scene or 10-minute scene here and there in between, like, eating dinner and eating pumpkin pie or whatever you're doing. I don't know what you guys do on Thanksgiving, but that's probably the old hat for most people. But Greg, this was fun. And I know this is one of our shorter ones, but I think this movie I would put right up there. If you have to give a grade for this movie, what's your final grade you're going to give for this movie on a 1 to 100 scale?
1 to 100 scale. Gosh, I mean, I feel like all the ones we do are so good. This is like probably like a 90, 95.
Okay.
Really. And in fact, I've seen Uncle Buck so many times, but this almost, maybe it's just because it's this time of year, but it almost eclipses Uncle Buck in my mind. It's just brilliant, really.
I mean, like,
if you haven't seen it, you can find it on demand. You can find it very easily, and you'll probably be able to find it on TV this week, I'm sure. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know what you subscribe to. I have YouTube TV. I literally just entered it in the search bar, and it was right there. And I think, like you said, AMC or one of those channels has it. So phenomenal movie. Greg's going with a 95. I'm gonna go a 93 just because to be different. So we're gonna give it a 94 average here. But just a great movie. You put it right up there with Home Alone. Put it right up there with any of the other movies we've done before. But this movie is definitely an A movie, and definitely worth the watch if you've never seen it, or if you're watching this podcast, you're going to rewatch it because you've probably seen it before. So Greg, thanks for joining me, and this was fun. And stay tuned because I am going to add that scene right at the end of this podcast just for fun. So enjoy that, and don't mess with the wrong guy, or you might get that scene on Thanksgiving. So Greg, and happy Thanksgiving to you, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there, and thanks for watching the 330 Sports Show. We will talk to you guys soon.
Welcome to Marathon. May I help you?
Yes.
How may I help you?
You can start by wiping that fucking dumbass smile off your rosy fucking cheeks. Then you can give me a fucking automobile, a fucking Datsun, a fucking Toyota, a fucking Mustang, a fucking Buick, 4 fucking wheels and a seat.
I really don't care for the way you're speaking to me.
And I really don't care for the way your company left me in the middle of fucking nowhere with fucking keys to a fucking car that isn't fucking there. And I really didn't care to fucking walk down a fucking highway and across a fucking runway to get back here to have you smile at my fucking face. I want a fucking car right fucking now.
May I see your rental agreement?
I threw it away.
Oh, boy.
Oh boy, what?
You're bust.